Hey, this is Mike Diercksen from Proactive, and you're listening to the Building Bite podcast. Tune in as we spotlight our guest, Nate Fuller, founder and director of Placer Solutions. Our episode is focused on construction innovation, creating a pathway to success. For more information on this episode and others, please check out the Building Bite at www.buildwithproactive.com.
Welcome to the Building Bite podcast, a podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals, where you'll hear from the experts about key topics that can help you be successful. I'm Chris Epps. I'm a senior director with Proactive, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Mike Diercksen, our manager of marketing and business development. Our guest today is industry thought leader Nate Fuller. Nate is the founder and director of Placer Solutions. Nate, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to diving in. Mike, how about yourself? How are you today?
Doing great, Chris. Really excited to have Nate on the podcast, and we've had some really great conversations in the past. So I'm looking forward to this one again.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this topic as well. Nate, thanks again for taking the time to join us today. It's a pleasure to connect with you. And before we dive into our main topic, I'm wondering if you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your career and kind of how you got to where you are with Placer Solutions.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I started my career in construction. I graduated from college with a degree in civil engineering and spent 10 years at Bechtel. Spent the early part of my career just kind of traveling the world on big Bechtel projects, big industrial projects, mining and metal, oil and gas, and ended up back in San Francisco around 2015, 2016. So right around the time all these emerging tech was kind of swirling around, and was kind of in the right place at the right time. Obviously, I worked my butt off to get there, but it was right around the time we were forming an office of innovation at Bechtel. And so I spent 3 years at Bechtel helping to build that office out, and got some good wins under our belt, learned some lessons. It's definitely the early day in construction tech. So there was no textbook to go by. A lot of it was just kind of figuring it out on the fly. So yeah, got that underway, and have since leveraged that experience to work with other large building contractors on their technology program.
Yeah, Nate, it's an interesting story. You mentioned being in the right place at the right time, but there's got to be something else to that, right? So you joined Bechtel, you're doing these large projects, but what was it specifically that kind of pulled you from that physical building into that kind of lane change to innovation within the construction space?
Yeah, 2015 was somewhat of an anomaly. I think it was definitely one of those tipping points in the history of technology where a lot of the technology that was kind of in being developed in Silicon Valley finally made it mainstream, and people began to really recognize that these were tools that weren't just cool gimmicks and weren't overhyped. Like there was actual business solutions that they could solve. And so it was around that time, I want to say we got started with drones. Actually, drones were kind of the big thing at the moment, and a lot of building contractors were, I want to say, playing with them, but they were taking these kind of backyard toys that their kids were fooling around with, and realizing that they could do things like photogrammetry and progress monitoring and stockpile measurements and all kinds of other stuff with them out in the field. So that was kind of the starting point, I want to say, for technology, some of the emerging tech that we talk about today within the construction industry, but then it evolved into looking at other technologies like robotics, like IoT, like augmented reality, virtual reality, some machine learning, early days of machine learning at that time as well. And we wanted to make sure at Bechtel that we were taking, a field first approach to the way that we were doing things. And so it was a small team. There's about 5 of us. And I was tasked with really getting out and understanding the needs of the field workforce. And so I really began to understand that at the end of the day, construction is constrained by 2 main things in technology. And it is the fact that it's a project-based industry, and it's also a field-based industry. And I learned this myself coming up, working on these large mega projects all over the world. The team members, the project members that you work with for 6 months to a year, maybe 2 years, when you go on to the next project, you lose that continuity, but the people, right? The people are still kind of the connections or the glue that holds the organization together. And so if we can understand the people and how the people shift and change over not just the life cycle of a project, but across projects, we can be much better at our technology implementations.
Yeah, that's why I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Nate, because there's a major through line in the podcast with the different episodes we've had, and especially when it comes to construction, a major through line is the people, right? It's what makes everything work. You can have the best process, you can have the best designs, anything, but if you don't have the right people in the right places, it all falls apart, right? So that's why our topic today is construction innovation, creating a pathway to success. And if that, I would like to, Nate, invite you to kind of walk us through your process with Placer Solutions, and how do you guys drive change with your clients?
Yeah, so it goes back to that key insight, and I mentioned building out the Office of Innovation at Bechtel. I've since had the opportunity to work with many, many more contractors, building contractors, and it all comes back to this common theme: project-based, field-based work, and technology implementations that might be great on one project, doesn't necessarily translate onto the next project. And pretty much every single software or technology vendor in construction understands this. It's like you're almost reselling back into the organization each time a project completes, because you have to be adopted by the next project. So Placer Solutions recognized early on with our clients that in order to address this need, we had to understand the people. We had to put the people before the technology, right? It's all people, process, technology, and the people are first for a reason. And I want to say that construction organizations are pretty good at managing construction activities and the people that have experts or subject matter experts in specific construction activities. But in terms of building technology programs, it's not always as intuitive. And so the first order priority with any building contractor client that we work with is to survey their organization and understand what the technology interests are, what the technology needs are of each individual, but almost more importantly is understanding how those different individuals are connected around the organization. And so I didn't want to do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to share my screen here, Mike and Chris, because I can put words to it. But it's always a little bit easier if it's possible to just kind of show what's going on. So I hope this shares properly. There we go.
Yep, you're good.
So in addition to understanding the people within the organization and what their technology needs are, we look at how these different people are connected. And I call this the hairball because it looks like a hairball, a very colorful hairball for folks that can't see what I'm showing. It's a very colorful hairball with a bunch of nodes and connections and different profile pictures of different people within the organization. But what this shows is how those different people are connected. And what we do is we do what's called a network analysis on the back end to tell us essentially who is the glue that is holding this big network together. And it's those central individuals or the glue that are holding this network together that are the ones that we identify as field influencers, or the folks within the field in construction companies who are technology savvy, who their peers seeing as being influential in conversations related to technology. And they're really the kind of the soft power within the construction organization in terms of getting stuff done and getting technology implemented at the field level. So I always say the list of names that come out of this, they're not the 10 or 12 usual suspects that a lot of technology programs are built around. These are a list of 50 or 60 or 70 data informed individuals who we know through this assessment are going to have outsized influence within the field and with technology adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. For those following along with the graphic visually, I see you have a bunch of different colored nodes there. What's the relevance of the different colors and nodes? Are those different like operational taskings or projects, interdepartmental groups? What's the relevance there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the key thing here is that the connections of these different individuals is not based on what project they're on or what function they work in or which department they're in. It's solely based on who they know within the organization in terms of technology. And so there's kind of three pieces of information here. There's obviously how the different people are connected around the organization, but there's also the size of the individual circle you mentioned. It indicates kind of what we call the centrality or their stickiness, how they hold together the organization. There's that piece of information. And then the color shows us subgroups. So the network analysis is really good at figuring out different subgroups of individuals. You can call them friend groups, you can call them affiliations, but basically folks that are yellow here tend to know other folks who are yellow, and folks that are red tend to know folks who are red. Not to say that they don't know these other folks, but the network analysis says that those individuals are just more closely related. And so it's a really useful piece of insight for particularly large construction companies who have undergone a lot of mergers and acquisitions, for example. If there's been a lot of M&As and new business lines spun up, the technology manager at the enterprise level can oftentimes have difficulty understanding who's who in the zoo, where to go within the organization, and in order to get new technology implemented. And so what this shows is very clearly, that'll very, very clearly pop up through the network analysis is, okay, these guys are kind of out in their silo within the organization, but here's who to go talk to, here's what they're interested in, and it lets you gain traction within parts of the organization that you otherwise might not have a ton of visibility into.
Gotcha. That was a wonderful explanation and not exactly what I thought it was on first glance. So I appreciate you taking the time to sort through that with us. Keeping in mind that our audience is primarily contractors, insurance brokers, and insurance carriers, and some other vendors. Who do you see as those field influencers? How do you and I think you probably just gave us some insight as to how you identify those people, but is there kind of a pecking order in terms of number of nodes here and group affiliation and how you implement from, say, one company versus another?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there is such a variety. I mean, people talk about the construction industry as if it's this behemoth or this monolith, and it's really not. It's really, we're talking about projects that have 20 or 30 subcontractors on them, and then you have different sectors of construction. So it's really sector by sector dependent. Some companies have tons of business lines, other ones just have a main central construction business. And so depending on that organizational structure, things can pan out a little bit differently. Typically, who we see coming up on this list of top field influencers are folks that, they're not, again, the usual suspects that you would think they are, but they're typically project managers, assistant project managers, project engineers. A lot of times superintendents will come up on here, foremen will come up. And those are really useful insights because again, the back office staff, there's this kind of divide within construction between the decision makers in the back office and the folks in the field who are boots on the ground implementing these technologies. And the folks in the back office typically have a different profile, and there's this cultural gap, there's a geographic gap, there's a divide there. And so knowing who the superintendents are and the foremen are in the field who can really get stuff done is hugely valuable to these construction organizations, because those are the guys and gals that are going to be able to really move things forward. So I think the real validating point from this exercise is when we see on that list of field influencers, the operators and the superintendents and the foremen and the folks that are really going to drive things forward.
That explanation just anecdotally resonates with me because every large contractor I've worked with, oftentimes, especially, we deal with a lot of insurance claims on the back end, but also we've done BIM work and some other like schedule related consulting. And it's interesting, at every single one of those companies, you have this group of superintendents. It's the guys who've been around 25, 30 years in a lot of cases that know everybody. And you tend not to think about it a whole lot. But then when you see it mapped out in front of you, it kind of jumps off the page at you. And you see those personal connections as a huge advantage in identifying those field influencers as you're talking about. How does that translate to improvement to the bottom line, improvement in efficiency and your specific implementation?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first step is just understanding the people. And then we begin looking at the technologies. And so once we know the people and how the people are connected around the organization and who those kind of central technology influencers are in the field, we then are able to profile every individual within the organization and give them a list of technology interests or technology needs that they have that they've indicated. And so we build what's called a persona, and we use a similar approach in the background, a little bit of statistics involved, But at the end of the day, what it says is, for this individual, here's the type of technologies that they're interested in. And so just to give an example, a recent client, heavy civil contractor, they had a lot of folks who were out in the field who had interests in things like machine control and drones, and they tended to kind of compartmentalize or bucket those technology types. And then in another part of the organization, you had folks who were really interested in artificial intelligence and exoskeletons and kind of the more emerging technology trends. And so we're able to kind of bucket those individuals. And not to say that there's no overlap there. It doesn't mean that the folks involved with, drones weren't also interested in things like artificial intelligence. It just means that on average, right, different folks have different interests. And what that's really useful for is when you're building a technology program in construction, the last thing you want to do is just to blast everyone day in and day out with the latest shiny object that comes across your desk, right?
Which is the MO for a lot.
That's exactly it. Yeah. The hype cycle is real. The hype cycle is definitely
absolutely
real. And you end up in that trough of disillusionment pretty quickly by doing that. So by profiling the folks in the field, you're able to really kind of hyper target your message. And so, you're not sending building information model type of technologies to the folks who are really interested in machine control, because not to say they don't care, but it's like not their cup of tea, right?
Right.
But it gives that insight at the field level that really allows you to build a technology program around the individuals. You can begin to build, I always often advocate for communities of interest. You can build communities of interests around different technology types that are maybe emerging, something like augmented reality, right? New technology, definitely a ton of applicability around the industry. I mean, it's a technology that is it's a slam dunk once we get it working, but it's a newer technology. And so, we're not going to just put it out on every job site tomorrow. But what we can do is we can identify the folks around the business in the field who are interested in augmented reality and adjacent technologies. And we can begin to build business competency within the organization around the people understanding the technology, and around the applications and the processes to make that technology apply. But we don't want to send that out to everyone in the organization. Back to the original point, by doing this exercise with Placer Solutions, we're able to really target those individuals within the project teams who that's going to resonate with most.
Yeah, I really like this concept, and Nate, we've talked about this previously, but there is a labor shortage within construction, and at times, people are saying, oh, well, if I want to implement this, I'd have to hire someone, or I have to bring in a team that knows this. And I think what's kind of illuminating in this process is, especially for the larger GCs out there, you may very well have people in your firm that are very interested in this, that could be champions for this moving forward. And rather than saying, I need to go hire a BIM manager, maybe you have someone who's already very interested in BIM and could be doing that implementation, right? So it does kind of allow you to mine from within and say, okay, who are my people? I know this person, maybe it's a junior project exec, but you're going, wow, they're interested in this. They're the ideal candidate. Rather than going externally, we could take this process internally, and we already know them.
That's 100% correct. I mean, construction organizations are some of the most innovative on the planet, just on their face, period. Day in and day out, people out in the industry are figuring things out. And so these creative individuals exist within construction companies. It's just this big untapped gold deposit that we just need to mine. And without a doubt, in really any medium to large size GC, those folks in the company exist. And it's just a matter of giving them the air cover to be able to really kind of explore these technologies and figure out how to use them.
Yeah, and I think one of the best ways from we're communicating to our audience, how they can take this information and really apply it is if there's a real world implementation, right? So can you give us an example of a time that you've worked with a client and they've been able to take this information and really apply it in a way that was benefiting them and their business unit?
Yeah. I think the best example is one that I alluded to earlier. Companies that are doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and so this was a client that had a couple of dozen of business lines, and a couple of those businesses were recent acquisitions. Using this information, as they were putting together a new technology program, they were, obviously able to see within kind of the known knowns, right? The parts of the business that the construction technology manager and senior leadership had good insight and visibility into. But it was really in those parts of the organization that they didn't have as much visibility into. This exercise allowed them to very quickly see, not only what technology types were going to be applicable to that new part of the business, but also who the individuals are within that recent acquisition, who they could kind of lean on as their allies to help drive things forward. And that exists really in any large construction company. Any large construction company is going to have parts of their business that are either new or developing, and this helps really kind of accelerate that technology discovery process.
And Nate, I know one of the things that you've talked about and written about is transformation. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you define that internally and why it's so important for construction companies, particularly, we've heard you talk about kind of mid-sized to larger contractors. Is there also a scalable solution maybe for those smaller and I guess up to mid-sized contractors, which likely struggle more or have more limited resources in implementing technology? Can you kind of talk about that transformation and how and if it's scalable across different companies and maybe your approach there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I say digital transformation, I'm referring to the digitization of all the workflows and processes that oftentimes require paper or manual input that could be done digitally. And so I think construction companies have done a great job in the past couple of decades. A lot of the HR, finance, back-end systems, ERPs have been digitized, and those were kind of the low-hanging fruit. But look, I mean, the money is made and lost in construction in the field, and I want to say that the pace of change there hasn't been nearly as fast, and I think anyone in the industry can attest to that fact. And so, when I say digital transformation, I'm really referring to digital transformation in the field. I think that's the next frontier for construction. And I think we made a lot of great progress there with field-facing project management solutions, field-facing safety, health, environmental, and quality type solutions. But there's still a long ways to go. I don't think that the network analysis exercise is necessary for every construction company on the planet. I oftentimes say if it's a construction company that's less than 300 people, there's a pretty good chance the folks in charge are going to know all those people, and you could maybe 300 pushing it, but you can get, if you can get everyone in the same room together and just really kind of hammer this stuff out, there's no need for it. And that's honestly the majority of the industry. But regardless of your size, you do need to know who your people are. You need to know who your people are, and you need to know what their needs and interests are in the field in order to put together any type of technology strategy. And so my advice would be, even as a small size building contractor, the business requirements gathering process is key. And if you're implementing a new solution, we know the usual suspects here. It's Procore, it's FieldWire, it's a handful of others. If we're implementing these project management solutions, even the implementation process will be much smoother, and you'll have a lot less heartburn and heartache by, in the early stages, doing a business requirements gathering process to understand who the different users are around your organization, and making sure that the implementation takes that into account.
Finding those champions is always important, and making sure that their interests are aligned with whatever your business needs are and what you're trying to accomplish. But so often we see those priorities misaligned. I would say, especially as contractors struggle with that growth.
Exactly. Yep. And it's not intuitive. I mean, it's really not. I mean, the construction industry is built around building things, and we're talking about building software solutions, and it's almost like oil and water sometimes. But there's a process involved, and I don't want to say I invented this process. It's a process that's been around for a while. But the business requirements gathering is hugely important, and again, like you say, aligning those interests is first, kind of the first priority.
Yeah, streamline the process, really. And like you said, you can send out a news blast, but if you send it to 500 people, it's only interesting to 20. It's really not as effective as you'd like it to be. So Nate, with that, as we're starting to wrap this up, one of the things we like to do on the show is give some takeaways. So if I'm the listener, if I'm a GC, broker, carrier, trying to engage with my team on this, what do you think the three big takeaways should be after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I had some thought about this, and thanks for prepping me that this question was going to come beforehand. So I'm not on the spot here, But obviously, if it's not obvious here, understanding your field teams is a first order priority when you're building out a technology program in construction. The field is where the money's made or lost, and if we can't understand the people there, the process and technology is not going to work. So that's number one. Number two is understand that the needs of these field teams oftentimes change not only across projects and during the project life cycle, but also across times as people move on to new projects. And so it's almost a moving target day in and day out in construction. And so we have to be aware of those changing environments. And the last piece here is that, what's really important is that we understand our people and then we map the technology onto them, because so often I see construction technology groups around the industry putting the technology first and getting really excited about the technology. And there's a lot to get excited about. But unless we understand the people in the field who are going to be users of that technology, the technology is somewhat meaningless. So understand your people and then map the technology onto them and not vice versa.
Excellent. And what about an action item, right? So again, our audience being mostly contractors, brokers, insurance carriers, if I'm listening, I'm going, this is great. I really should probably be doing this. What's that first step, right? Like, what's that first thing they should be looking to prioritize?
Yeah, I would say if you're building a construction technology department within your organization, virtual design and construction department, business transformation department, whatever the case might be, or heck, even if you're just implementing a new piece of software across the organization, bring in outside help. There's no harm in bringing in folks that are experts in these areas, and I know that the IT budget for a lot of construction companies is a lot less. I think we all know this. It's less than other industries. And that's really a shame, because I think it holds up our ability to progress and move things forward. So don't be hesitant to bring in outside help when necessary. And I obviously recognize that that is a little self-serving as a tech consultant in the industry, but I really think it's a key need across the industry is bringing in the right people at the right time to help solve these problems.
Well, and I think, too, given something you said that kind of resonates, Nate, I think with probably a lot of our audience, is that we have been historically as an industry sort of slow adopters of technology. And I think we're getting a lot better, and we're kind of turning the corner on that, but getting a little bit of help in helping accelerate that and kind of measure twice, cut once in that sort of implementation is great advice for anybody in our audience. Hey, before we let you go, Nate, we always like to hit our guests with a few rapid-fire questions. One of my favorites is, what are you seeing today that gets you energized about your work with your clients? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
I think it can at times be a really frustrating industry, and I think it's important to recognize that it takes time and effort to really move things forward, and I love the ecosystem builders out there, and I'll give a shout out to AXXL and what Rose Hall has put together there. I think ecosystems like that, bringing like-minded individuals together to share lessons learned, to share the heartache and the pain that we're all experiencing out around the industry, and hopefully learn lessons from it so that we can all become better in the process. I think the ecosystems are what gives me hope.
Nice. And, another thing, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, where do you see people and firms struggling the most with this innovation? I know you mentioned bringing the technology to the people as opposed to the other way around. So is that where you really see the most struggle with that?
Yeah, I would hammer that point again. I think way too many in industry put the technology first, which is a good starting point. You have to understand what technology exists, but you very quickly have to move out of that mindset and more into it's a talent management issue and a strategic focus, strategic priority type of question. So transitioning from the technology to organizational change management, I think, is the biggest challenge.
And Nate, you speak to a pretty wide swath of professionals and companies within the construction industry, especially those larger contractors. What does your projection for the industry look like in the next 5 to 10 years from a people and technology perspective?
Yeah, I definitely think we're moving out of that first wave of construction tech. And I alluded to it earlier. It's all the project management solutions, the field-facing applications, whether they're project management or safety, health, environmental, and quality. I think there's still a ways to go there, but folks are generally pretty aware of that stuff at this point. And I think that, soon that will be pretty ubiquitous across the industry. Basically, all that digitization of paper processes, I think, it will pretty soon be solved. I think where we're headed, though, is towards more citizen development. So we're headed down the path of, everyone's seen ChatGPT at this point. If you haven't, you should go look it up because it's wicked.
Yep.
It's wicked stuff. But pretty soon everyone is going to have at their disposal the ability to do kind of superhuman things, and so understanding your people becomes even more important then, because literally anyone on every project in the field is going to be able to do a bunch of superhuman things. And unless there's kind of a strategic initiative behind at the enterprise level to really understand and help channel all of that energy, it can go really poorly really quickly. And so I think there'll be even more of a need for this stuff down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting and something I'm definitely highly interested in. And you brought up ChatGPT, but yeah, how far removed are we from being able to say, hey, go write me some BIM standards for a project with this parameter, or hey, go run structural steel calculations on 20-story mid-rise building, things like that. And we're so close, and I could talk to you probably for another 3 hours about that. But you're right. I encourage people to go out and do a little research there and see what's actually just we're on the very spear's tip of being able to implement some of that stuff.
Definitely. Yep. It's exciting. It's an exciting time.
Yeah. And so, Nate, thanks so much for joining us today. One of our favorite questions we like to ask for the podcast is, this is the Building Bite. That's building insurance technology with the experts. You are our expert. What are you taking a bite at it today over in Portland, Oregon? Is it Voodoo Donuts? What's the move?
Ooh, Voodoo Donuts are pretty good. I'm gonna hit up one of the food carts. Hit up there's this JoJo Portland, and they make a pretty wicked chicken sandwich. So that's the lunch spot today.
Very nice.
Nice. Well, Nate, thank you again for chatting with us today. If our listeners want to hook up with you after the podcast, where can they find you? LinkedIn, website, what's best to reach out to you?
Yeah, definitely active on LinkedIn. There's also the website, placersolutions.io. Or honestly, if you want, just shoot me an email. Email is nate.fuller@placersolutions.io.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. We appreciate your time and look forward to having you back soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you for listening to The Building Bite. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbite.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Bite news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbite.com.